Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Who is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world.
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child. Group on WVON 1690 AM, the Talk of Chicago. I am Vietnam veteran host Cliff Kelley. America's Heroes Group is a live streaming podcast, global platform, radio, print, and digital media broadcast show that empowers change agents through intentionally disseminating information, resources, and referrals to empower our military population.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. This week with our roundtable with clean energy infrastructure partner Zodiac Solutions, LLC. Today is Saturday, October 1st, 2022. October is Breast Cancer, Mental Health, National Disability, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Our host is Cliff Kelley, just heard at the top of the hour. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have a familiar face and voice on our show today at this segment. You know him very well, Rob Howard, U.S. Navy veteran and president and CEO of Zodiac Solutions, LLC. We're going to talk about Zodiac Solutions, Brevian Energy, and some things that's going on in the world today. We're talking about energy independence, also ways to save money, make money, and do better things with your life. We're talking about, let's talk about what's going on with this clean energy. How you doing, Rob?
I am doing good, and I want to make sure we give a shout out to let the people who are dealing with these disasters, the hurricanes, that we're thinking about them. And
right.
It's tough to watch. Mm-hmm. It really is. It's tough to watch.
And that's something I wanted to really touch on because we've gone through this situation a few times before in the past. We had back in 2021 in Texas. Texas had its own power grid, the only state in the country with its own power grid. It got hit with devastating cold weather. And they had power structure failures, power grid failures across the state where 700 people died because they did not have energy to sustain basic things like food, keeping the refrigerator on, heating their homes, things like that. Now we have a hurricane in the south that's touching South Carolina, it touches Puerto Rico. Where are we at in the conversation of microgrids, and tell us how microgrids can be a solution for these types of things?
Well, two things. One, when you ask the question, where are we? We're literally not there yet as a country. We're not there yet. One, because the current structure of how our utilities are designed and built, there's what I like to call it's old school with regard to the folks in charge and how they want to do it. We talk to companies all the time, and they don't realize that microgrids can be a solution. And we're not saying it's got to be a solution for every single place. Like you mentioned the Texas area. The Texas situation is interesting because Texas chose not to be a part of, let's say, the Western state grid. Texas chose not to be a part even of more Eastern state grids. Because what happens is if you have an issue on that larger scale, had they been connected to the Western states grid, it would have been easier to link in to power to be shipped in from other areas. So that's one situation that Texas, I hope I don't offend the Texas folks, but it was Texas being Texas. We got ours. The microgrid issue, particularly around the islands and those places that aren't just large land masses, the failure to have microgrids, the failure to really lean into renewables has kept us on a track to where we're going to continue this. Climate change is real. People can say what they want. But when you take an entire ocean and you increase the temperature 1/10 of 1 degree, your storms will be large.
Mm-hmm.
They pick up steam. If you'll notice how those storms, once they get that warm water, they're bigger, stronger, faster. They sound like superheroes now. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is the infrastructure that we had that was built for that type of storm every 100 years, we've had 6 in the last 10 or 15 years. And so it's going to continue. What do? We have to lean in to real investment in microgrid technology. If you just started in Puerto Rico, because of the terrain of Puerto Rico, it's hilly, it's got villages in different areas. You could literally set up microgrids in those areas and not have to run wires, poles and wires. You can take care of that area. Now I can go to another area. It's cheaper. You're now using renewables. You're saving the planet and you're saving money. However, we tend to do the same thing. We want to rebuild what we had. Sometimes we need to look at what we had, start moving forward to what we need to do. Because honestly, if you think this is the last Category 4 hurricane, then you're not paying attention. So it's going to get worse. So do we continue to repeat it? Look at what the money they're asking for from Florida. But this was a state that, I mean, DeSantis voted against the money when it was up on the East Coast and they needed that money. And now when it's me, I need it. I don't begrudge them for asking for it. I'm saying be open and honest about what we need. Florida's infrastructure, if you'll notice, there were bridges totally wiped out. So not only can we start doing this, but one, we've got veterans with the skill set that we can put to work. But we're going to be so busy dealing with the crisis. This is my fear. They're going to be so busy dealing with the crisis that they're not going to focus on how we can prevent the next crisis, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect
We should
sense.
be putting people to work in livable jobs. We should be training them right now. We should be, and just continue, because if you'll notice, there is a sharing agreement between utilities when they're even when we're rebuilding after fires, we're rebuilding after hurricanes. Utility folks from all over the country travel to that area, and they help because you're trying to basically rebuild the entire infrastructure all at once. And you need those extra hands. Well, that's a great opportunity to bring in folks, particularly veterans, and have them come in as helpers, learning how it works. Because not everyone can handle that type of work, man. That's tough work. I mean, it's really, really tough work. So it frustrates me in that you see some of the things that need to get done. I'm constantly talking to my congressman about what are we going to do? What are we going to do to prepare? You know, what is it? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So Florida, they're going to this hurricane will probably ramp up to the top at the highest cost based on the size and the damage that this hurricane did. The sad part is, based on what we're looking at from the climate, the next one could easily surpass it. So what do? We have to start investing in our infrastructure, but not the same infrastructure. Microgrids won't work for everyone. So when I have areas that are hurricane and tropical storm prone, I've got Puerto Rico. We owe Puerto Rico. These are citizens. We owe them to build a system that is not a patchwork. If you go down there, that system is patchwork.
Mm-hmm. People with generators in their backyards, all kind of crazy stuff. Just people doing whatever they can do to get power. Diesel generators and little kind of things. The original grid is not even up and running yet.
It is frustrating, and sometimes I'm when you look at like small businesses like us, and you are really working, because we have to work with those investor-owned utilities. Mm-hmm. And when we have a project, we have an investor-owned utility right now. We have a project. We have been trying to get their part of it to get the approvals almost a year.
Wow.
Almost a year. So we have a client waiting on us, and we can't get all of the approvals to get this project done. And so the answer really has to be the businesses have to lean in, but our elected officials have to lean in. We have to say, wait a minute, this is just not good enough. And we're better because we have the knowledge, skills, and ability to get this done. Because all they have to do is go in, get that part that we're asking them for, because, you have to go through them because you are connected to the grid. Even though you put the microgrid in, it still has a connection to the grid.
But
so
correct me if I'm wrong, though, the microgrid can still run independently of the grid. Unlike most systems, when you put some solar panels on your house, whatever, your solar panels are useless without the grid. But a microgrid can run by itself with or without the grid.
And again, the technology, you know how they say, we have the technology. Literally, what a microgrid, the controller is the key. It literally can say, okay, I'm taking this solar power when it's enough. Oh, by the way, the house isn't using all of it, or the building isn't using all our solar panels. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to charge the battery. Or I've got larger systems where you've got hydrogen fuel cell technology. I have a factory. I can now take natural gas and use half the amount of natural gas for the same amount of electrical output using hydrogen fuel cell technology. And so when I need base load at night, because solar is not a magic pill. The sun doesn't shine 24/7. Solar gives you about 30% of the day where it's actually good. But if you mix in solar, wind, hydrogen fuel cell technology, even low emission generators, Puerto Rico should have a system. Florida, in those outlying areas, should have a microgrid system. That's what we need to lean into. The toughest part, I think, if someone was to ask me why, it's a lack of understanding of the technology.
But this is the thing, though. This is what confuses me, because I hear a lot of businesses and corporations, Fortune 500 companies, that are saying, they're realizing, because they look at it at the bottom line, they're saying, if I have a microgrid, and I'm in these sensitive areas in Texas and Florida, all around the world, it would be nice to have my own power structure that I can control, and I can still tap into the grid and use it, but I can save money in the process. So if once so goes the S&P 500, so goes the world for the most part. So why are we seeing pushback in slow motion when we just had this infrastructure bill that was passed by the current administration? We have this Build Back Better plan, which includes the Inflation Reduction Act and so on, all this money flowing in. What's really going on? What politics are at play here?
Well, I think you just said it. It's the politics. Follow the money. If I have a company and my focus is gas and oil, these other microgrid, all this other stuff is cutting into my profit. So my lobbying is about the business that I'm running today. And our system is a quarter system. Those companies are focused on quarterly earnings. They're not focused on, let me say it this way. Quarterly earnings become out front is what they're having to address. And because they do have, 3, 5, 10, 25-year plans, but I need to make sure I'm profitable this quarter. If I am investing all this over here when people don't even understand it, then it makes it difficult to get that investment. So what we try to do is to continue one by one city council, one school board, because they're the ones that are struggling with funding. But if I can save you a third on your electric, just had a conversation, by the way, I just got back from Ghana for an education conference. And that's a whole nother conversation that we need to have because of the tariff. With all that sun, solar is almost non-existent, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I had a conversation, and this building was they spend $19,000 a month. Wow. For their utility bill. And when we told them, what if you were only spending 14? And it was hard for them to even they couldn't wrap their head around it because they were like, how can that be possible? And huge roof surface, warehouse area where we could have the batteries, everything was set up. They have access to a natural gas pipeline, so everything is set up. And so it's a matter of walking them through it. Because if it's not, it's like sharing in the community other jobs besides being, I'm going to play basketball or be a rapper. You can be my plumber drives a better car than I do, we don't think about those trade jobs. And so it's about explaining to the business owners and getting to them. And when you're working with government's slow. For better or for worse, sometimes that's good because you don't want to jump out there and not do things wrong. But the business owners, why we target them is because they can move a lot faster. But my dedication to my community, I want my school district complaining about not having supplies. Well, if I can save you a third on your electric bill, you can put that to supplies. It's not brain surgery. So that's where I think we really need to lean in. And people need to ask, even if you're not in the utility industry, you ought to be asking your school board, why aren't you saving on your utility bill so that we can have more books? I mean, it's amazing. You go and talk to teachers. Spending $1,000 a year their own money on supplies because the school can't supply it. It's criminal. Right. I mean, so I think a lot of it is how do we dive in and who's having the conversations, and the political establishment. I keep coming back to our elected officials. The lobbyists are talking to them on a regular. So we need to have that conversation. People can call their congressman, they can call their city council, they can call their state representatives. We have to start asking the question, and that's why I really do appreciate you all are bringing this conversation forward for people who are like, wait a minute, and to include the veterans. The military trained us to be dropped in the middle of nowhere and set up a city. Mm-hmm. It's not that we can't do it.
Right.
And so it's frustrating, but we keep grinding.
But the thing is also too important, people have to understand that when people think about microgrids, their mind tends to gravitate towards solar exclusively. They're thinking this is some kind of solar project and things like that. Microgrids can run off any type of fuel source. It does not matter. It does not have to be solar. It could be wind. It could be natural gas. It could be a diesel engine. It could be whatever. Alaska, as we know, has tons of microgrids because it's so remote and it's so difficult for them to patch into the main grid. Because you got to remember, Canada separates us. A whole country, size of the United States, separates us from Alaska. They have to rely on microgrids, and the weather being such that it's so temperate over there. It's so cold, and you got the ice and everything. You can't just connect them to a power line, run an extension cord, and plug them into the grid. They rely on microgrids.
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
It works.
And your understanding, you're basically compared to the conversations we have, you're at the PhD level because really. I talk to elected officials all the time. I mean, school boards, city councils, stuff like that. Honestly, electricity is not what people do.
And that's one thing I wanted to touch base on, because that's when I was going through getting ready for this show. That's one thing that kept hitting me over and over and over again. The average person does not understand or realize how much energy that they use on a daily basis. That we take it so for granted. And we think we used to flipping a switch and it just works. We don't think about all that goes behind it and all the people that was required to put that in place. And the world as we know it is changing. Electric cars are coming. So we have electric cars coming now, and I've been hearing conversations about people now trying to transition using these electric vehicles as generators inside microgrids.
Well, think about this. In California, and I'm sure in other areas, when you put in the charger for your electric vehicle, part of that agreement says that they can use your car as a source if necessary. Wow. And so you're being integrated whether you want to or not. So, and then how we are, again, I just got back from Ghana, one of the areas down on the Cape Coast. There are areas, 98% of the folks were not on any grid, had any power whatsoever.
Wow.
So we just assume you can turn the switch on. It was, in some of those areas, they literally go to the market each day to get their food because there's no place to store it. There's no refrigerator. There's none of that. And so the question is, how do we educate the folks who are here who have this? And we have to keep doing it. Your radio show, I've been sharing it with others because you're having these conversations that we're just not having in regular company and the people who can make decisions. We need decision makers to better understand. Because here's the thing. if you look at your utility bill, I think people ought to take some time and look at it, because most people, I found, they just pay it. They don't look at the fact that you've got a transmission cost. If you're in an area with a nuclear power plant, you have a decommissioning cost. And you have a gas cost. You have an electrical cost. So you have all of these different costs. Do you even understand why? And people just, what's my bottom line? I'll pay it. And so a lack of understanding is a part of our issue. It's really to believe that electricity just comes from the wall. Mm-hmm. And so we have to get to, the world is going to change, and if our communities don't get ahead of it, and that's what we're trying to do, is get ahead of it.
And that's
You've
right.
got to get ahead.
Rob, I really appreciate you being here. U.S. Navy veteran and president and CEO of Zodiac Solutions. We just scratched the surface on this topic. We got to have you back, and we're going to get into this a little more deeper until people start to realize what we're saying, and also the importance across the country, and also for our veterans to help them get some work and also become more prosperous, not just for ourselves, but for the entire nation. This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Who is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world.
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child on my first airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that people need to see. Often we don't, do the things to show how great our people are. It changes the paradigm of how people think about us, about the collective consciousness of what it means to be us.
And we've been having great conversations about trying to get more African Americans into aviation. And we got a bill that we're trying to get passed that would allow the Pell Grant to be used to help finance aviation education.
This is where I started with this entire conversation by saying, if it were not.
Welcome back to America's Heroes Group, our roundtable. This segment is community outreach. We are globally connected with Kaiser Health News. Today is Saturday, October 1st, 2022. October is Breast Cancer, Mental Health, National Disability, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Our host is Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host, Army National Guard veteran. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have our panelist on the line, Mr. Darius Tahir. He's a tech correspondent with Kaiser Health News, and he focuses on how technology affects healthcare. We're going to talk about an article he has written, embedded. It's called on kaiserhealthnews.org or khn.org, embedded, how medical records show discrimination. And what we're going to talk about is the discrimination that's going on and how doctors look at you. Tell us about that, Mr. Tahir.
Hi, how are you?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Good. I'm here in D.C. And it's very wet, so I feel very damp.
That's my hometown, so I appreciate you on the weather update. So tell us. So I read your article. It's very, very interesting. However, a lot of people, I would say, probably are not surprised by some of your conclusions. Tell us about bias and also what people are perceiving as doctors when they see certain groups of people. And it goes deeper than skin color. It goes into a lot of different things. We'll talk about that. But explain to us the implicit bias that you saw when you were doing your research.
That's right. Yeah, no, bias is a part of it, and it's about the sort of communications we have with one another, or doctors have with one another. They keep records, and that's sort of a baton that they hand back and forth. And so the descriptions they write in those records are supposed to be informative about what a patient felt when. Does the patient have chest pain? Does they do they not sleep well? That's the theory, at least. In practice, however, many doctors can transmit their own personal prejudices about the patient. So, for example, they can transmit, signals about their, socioeconomic status, about their race or their gender. And so what my article focused on is what happens when a doctor, is too devoted, shall we say, to transmitting, a false impression, a knee-jerk impression about a patient. Are they sort of suggesting that the patient is just there to get, some powerful, drugs? Or are they saying this is, a very trustworthy patient, that we really need to devote our best efforts, to treat and to cure? And what I found in researching this story is that many patients, whether it's people of color, Black patients, Hispanic patients, other patients, or oftentimes women, or people of who may not be as financially successful as other patients. When those patients arrive at the doctor, oftentimes they're sort of stereotyped, and that stereotype goes into the record, and that affects the care that they get from future doctors. And that can be a powerful anchor in terms of the care you get in the future, as to whether you get the full attention or whether you get, suspicion and skepticism from your doctors.
I wanted to read this part of your article. I thought this really kind of sums it up, and it opens up a lot of questions, but also it's kind of scary when you think about it. And it sounds so, when I read this, it's going to sound so technical and also so cold in a way. Quote, compliance with medical therapy, health of both individuals, blood type, comorbidities, ability to care for themselves and be stable in post-transplant social support system. Not all potential recipients and donors meet those criteria. This is what someone said in the article, quote, as a person was who quoted this, I'm quoting in the article. So this was something that was quoted. So basically saying that I'm going to make a judgment as to whether or not, if you need a kidney transplant, or if you need a liver transplant, or if you need some type of life-saving medical procedure, I may prioritize you based on my own judgment, whether or not I feel that you are going to do the things that we think you should be doing in order to maintain it. Or is it going to be worth it, or are there more worthy candidates? When you're thinking to yourself, well, if I need a kidney or I need a liver, they're not going to prioritize me. It's first come, first serve, right? But they're going to, well, not exactly. They have criteria, as I just read, as to who gets what and when.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So to just back up a little bit, the kind of one of the stories, one of the patients I profiled in my article was a gentleman named David Contra, who was a bicyclist and audio technician here in Washington, D.C. He was Black. He had suffered from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and as part of his treatment, eventually needed a transplant, a kidney transplant. And during his care, the doctors and social workers who assessed him essentially came to believe that he was not a good candidate for a liver transplant. His partner, a woman named Kate Cohen, kind of talked to me and felt that the way he was described in the record was not something she recognized. They felt, or she felt, that he was sort of implicitly being belittled by the way he was described, that he was described as somebody who would drink a 12-pack of beer, every day, when in fact, he was not that voluminous a drinker. And so because of that, she felt that the medical system developed this belief that if they were to do a liver transplant, that he would just and I'm doing scare quotes here, kind of waste the transplant and not be again a scare quote here, deserve that transplant, and so that's kind of an example of how you can communicate certain beliefs, certain biased beliefs about a patient through this record, and it's very hard, if you're a patient, to rebut those beliefs, if they're incorrect.
I'm going to read your title again. Embedded How Medical Records Show Discrimination is available on Cajun.org and also on the Daily Beast and anywhere you can find this article if you Google it. And also, we're going to see if we can get it on our AHD.org as well. This goes down to really, and it's kind of, it's hard to really say it, but it's almost as if doctors are playing God, literally. But I mean, we want to, we feel thankful and we're blessed to have doctors because doctors do provide life-saving treatment. Doctors do have the skills and the training and the techniques and the technology to help us. But in some cases, it appears that, and as we've seen like throughout history, there is certain types of biases and perceptions that don't allow everyone to get equity when it comes to getting health care. This idea, for example, that you kind of touched on in your article, and if this has been talked about with many doctors, the idea that certain groups of, or races of people can perceive pain or take pain better than others. So therefore, we don't need to prescribe pain medication. One doctor actually talked about there was a study where they actually went out and surveyed doctors and asked them if they felt if there was actual biological differences between races, or for example, do African Americans, is their bodies this way versus non-African Americans, or Asian Americans this way versus non-Asian Americans? And it was surprising that healthcare students, doctors in medical school, and physicians all showed bias, that they actually believed unscientific, unproven myths that people had different biologies. If for some reason your blood, my blood might be different other than the blood type, but for some reason your blood might, if I have O positive and you have O positive, for some reason my O positive might be better or worse than yours.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there have been a lot of, kind of very strange and unscientific beliefs about, how different races differ biologically that, have affected care, certainly.
So, I mean, to me, that's racial profiling. That was a 2016 study. It was done by Dr. Norman Oliver, Kelly Hoffman, and Sophie Trelter. This was an actual study from the University of Virginia. You can look that up on Google that as well. So the thing of it is that when we're talking about healthcare, isn't my money the same as your money, or if my insurance company is paying for it? So how does who pays for the care affect treatment?
Well, that's a great question. That wasn't necessarily touched on by MyCare, or by the article. But certainly there's, profiling. I think that's a verb you used about, the socioeconomic status of a patient, and that plays on, certainly doctors and other clinicians' mind when it comes to, taking a patient, seriously, or sort of believing that perhaps they're, out for something else, or can't be trusted to perceive their own conditions correctly. So certainly there's an element of patients, of assessment of patients, financial means in the back of many doctors' minds.
Mm-hmm. So in a sense, when we talk about medical records, and the things you touched on in the article directly was there were certain things that some of the people you interviewed, they read that wasn't accurate. They felt that these were things that the doctor kind of just, had them ran off in their own tangent and ran off in an area that wasn't really 100% truthful, and it actually affected their care. The person you talked about, Contra, passed away because he didn't get treatment. Yes. Now the thing is that is there two different sets of records or books, so to speak? So where there's one that you see on your app, or your I use MyChart, for example. MyChart, I can communicate with my doctors. I can see notes and things of that nature. Is there a separate set of notes that we should be seeing?
No, there's just one record, and as a result of some kind of regulatory changes, we're going to see kind of more and more of your own records. You're going to be able to see many of the notes doctors write about you, and sort of that the product of that is going to make notes less private. It used to be that notes were sort of private communications between doctors, and sort of now they're more shared. And so that, a product of that is perhaps going to be to expose, some of the biases that, some doctors might have in terms of assessing the patients that they see.
Mm-hmm. So how can patients protect themselves? What's the best way when they feel like that they're not getting the care that they're getting, or that maybe aren't quite sure that they're being heard? What are some things that they can do to kind of get better outcomes?
Well, as I sort of mentioned earlier, we're going to be able to see records more easily now in the coming months. So you should be able to just see what doctors say about you more readily. In terms of what to do about it, that's tricky. I spoke to one doctor who, kind of told me that, she had seen, incorrect things in her own record. And she admitted to me that, she was a little scared to point that out to her doctor because she worried that her doctor, wouldn't like her and wouldn't, care for her in the same way that he had before. So it is tricky. Certainly, if you're polite but persistent, that may have an effect on many doctors, but it's not guaranteed. So I think that's a tricky problem for sure.
I'm a proponent of firing the doctor. I mean, if you have a doctor that's not talking to you or not, you feel like there is miscommunication, is other doctors out there. I say go find you a better doctor. I've changed doctors many times. I've had heart conditions and things I've been treated for. I'm not sitting with a doctor that's not listening to me. But the question
I think that's a very rational attitude.
Yeah,
certainly.
But the thing is, but then once again, unless those records are open and people are being diligent enough to actually use the software, like I use MyChart, for example. Not all hospitals are affiliated with MyChart. There's other apps that are out there. You have to check with your hospital and see who they're affiliated with, and then make sure you're keeping up with those records. But oftentimes, like you kind of alluded to, people don't feel comfortable enough or feel confident enough to really step up and say, hey, this as a one-off story, I mentioned I had a heart condition. I talked to my cardiologist one time, and I swear I thought she was going to just, whip out a bat and start beating me because she was. We got into it. We got into it. We had a moment. She's telling me to take just do this procedure. Just do this procedure. It's no big deal. I'm like, well, what's involved with it? Wait, look it up online. It's just just being dismissive. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to, no, it doesn't work that way. I'm not, this is my body. I'm not just going to do whatever just because you say do it. So we got into it. And that was a hot moment.
Yeah. You gotta be active in your own care.
So where do you see the future in this? Do you see that, where do you see the next step for people becoming more aware and more active at speaking up to their doctors? And what things do we need to do to understand this better?
Well, to your earlier point, if you can look in your own record and kind of either speak to your own doctor or switch doctors, I think that might have a powerful effect in the future. But I'm not an oracle, so I can't predict anything.
Mm-hmm. I think that's critical. I think like we're saying is that as long as you are being more diligent and speaking up for yourself. We talk about this a lot, particularly with veterans, because oftentimes veterans either don't want to get care because they don't feel as comfortable in the environment, so they maybe avoid care altogether, or they're very good at complaining and bitching and moaning about the care. But to the civilian population, I think it's really critical that people, like you mentioned, go and look at those records and go and see what's being said. If your hospital is affiliated with some kind of app or a communication device like MyChart, look at your records on MyChart, see what they're saying about you, and make sure that it's accurate. And then you don't have to be confrontational, but at the same time, understand that this is your body. This is what you're going through. Your insurance company has no problem writing that check to somebody else. So if you are not feeling like you're being heard, you feel like, and I've gone through this with family members, I've gone through this with loved ones. If you don't feel like you're being heard, you have to speak up and advocate for yourself. I think that's so important. Another thing I wanted to touch base on is the fact that this wasn't quite one of the things in your article, but it actually wastes money, because when doctors don't look at situations more thoroughly and kind of be aware of their bias, but then also take a time out to start to really try to communicate with their patients. When bias influences their treatment, it wastes money. $310 billion, we estimate. This was from a study from the Institute of Health Improvement. Also, there's a person that also talked about this on a YouTube video. He's the CEO of Be More America. $310 billion a year wasted on misdiagnosis, attributed to bias, because people are saying, "Oh, you don't need these pain pills. You don't need this. You don't need that. I don't want to waste the treatment on you." And then now there's health consequences because of that.
Yeah, no, I kind of spoke in my article with an expert on misdiagnosis, a guy named Hardeep Singh, and he sort of said that, misdiagnosis often happens with patients that doctors believe are difficult and document as difficult, and then that affects care going forward. So certainly it probably has an effect in terms of affecting the way doctors misdiagnose patients and suggest the wrong care for them.
So tell us, give us in the last 10 minutes we have to talk about this topic, what are some of the key things that that your article really kind of shed light to you? What did you get out of the article, and what was really profound to you mostly? That something that you learned that you really didn't really know before?
Well, I was surprised. It took me a while to report, and many of the people I spoke with couldn't go on the record for various reasons. But I was really struck by the breadth of people who were affected by this issue. We're talking about people who had COVID, people who were in nursing homes or at the end of their lives. People who were seeking transplants. So it really seemed to be an issue that were affecting people all across society, and that people found very difficult and struggled with. So I was really affected by just the breadth of experience in there.
And if you were to give advice to doctors, what would you say to doctors that are listening to this broadcast? We do a lot of medical shows. We have a lot of doctors that are out there, some of which have talked about this topic in the past. Others maybe haven't really looked at it. What would you advise say to doctors of how to address the implicit bias that we all have? Because the idea is we're not trying to blame one group or any other group, but really we all have some kind of implicit bias at some level. How do we address it?
One of the lines that stuck with me, from Hardeep Singh, the expert in misdiagnosis, is that oftentimes this happens because of, stale thinking and kind of knee-jerk writing. So, it's useful for all of us sometimes just take a sec and make sure that we're, fully considering, what we're writing and what we're thinking and doing, as opposed to just, going with the first, knee-jerk impression.
And do you think that we're moving in the right direction? You think more awareness is being brought to this topic? Because we've heard implicit bias before. I don't know what's happened in the last 10 years or so. I personally have not looked at it from the healthcare perspective. I know what I do with my body, with my doctors. I know what I've done with my loved ones and their doctors. But from what you've seen in your research, are people starting to really take this seriously?
It seems like people are taking it seriously. I feel like we're probably at kind of the beginning of dealing with this problem, just because we don't necessarily have perfect numbers or perfect figures for assessing this problem. So it's hard to know whether you're making progress or not if you don't really have very good statistics to track it.
And that's something we need to document. We need to make sure that people are aware of this. We do need to do a better job than starting to make these records and also to document it. A lot of the stuff, from what I understand, was coming through social media, particularly after COVID. During the pandemic, people were talking about more and more the different types of disparities they were experiencing, and the lack of communication and the miscommunication. And also in that time frame from 2020 to 21, you saw prioritizing going on. Certain places, certain people getting care or treatment, and others being kind of pushed off into the hallway to die of COVID. I mean, so that was something that actually happened and woke a lot of people up. Do you think that that's playing into the awakening of the beginning, as you mentioned, of this conversation starting?
It could be. I did find many of the patients I spoke with in this article through social media. So, it certainly could be.
Mm-hmm. I think that's interesting. I mean, I would love to see some more topics on this, and also see what kind of trickles into case studies and more actual research. It seems that most of the research that I found was mostly based on university studies and a lot of medical students doing their own surveys. I believe the guys that I talked about in that 2016 study from University of Virginia, that was actually medical students, I believe. They actually did that. It wasn't something that was sponsored that I know of, that I'm aware of. It could be wrong. But that was something that, and they were even, they had they saw certain things in their training, and then they wanted to bring it to light. And so they decided to do a survey, and they surveyed tons and tons of doctors and medical students, and they found out that people that are being trained to learn biology had misconceptions about biology based on race and based on things of that nature, which is ironic to me. It's crazy to me.
One of the interesting sources for my article was based on some of these researchers getting their hands on tens of thousands of patients' records and using artificial intelligence to analyze the notes and see what descriptions kind of recurred more frequently with certain patients. And they sort of found that doctors were more likely to describe, especially black patients, as more aggressive or difficult than white patients. So I think we're at kind of the beginning of doing that kind of research. A lot of times, so one of those studies I'm thinking of was just out in Chicago. So just looking at one, set of records, tens of thousands of records in one city. So I imagine as people continue to work at this, we'll see more and more records across more and more cities to really get a handle of how frequent these kind of descriptions are.
Mm-hmm. And I think another thing that you kind of touched on, I mean, not directly, but the implications of what you wrote about. Like I said, once again, I'm going to give you the title of this article, Embedded, How Medical Records Show Discrimination. You can find it on the Daily Beast and also Cation.org. We're going to see if we can get it on AHG.org, our website. But one of the things that's I think is kind of profound about and touches on is the idea of, when we talk about bias and racial profiling and, misconceptions about race and, remember, for example, a doctor told me one time, you have high blood pressure, but all black people have high blood pressure. So don't worry about it. It's like, I'm not too concerned about it with you because you're black and you have high blood pressure. And all my black patients have high blood pressure. Like, that was something that was actually told to me. But looking at the reality is that oftentimes we because we're just looking at what we see, even someone who's a trained doctor who's looking at records, and he's giving me he's not lying to me. He's not telling me something that's not true, but he's prescribing the wrong reason to it. He's thinking because of my skin color, that's why I have high blood pressure. That's basically what he's saying. I'm not sure if he meant it that way or not. However, the reality is you have to look deeper and look at your environment, your nature, the nature versus nurture kind of argument, right? What types of stuff am I eating? Why am I eating these types of foods? Am I going to Popeyes or am I going to Panera Bread? What kind of stuff am I doing every day that causes me to have high blood pressure? That is more critical and more accurate as far as getting a proper diagnosis than, well, you're black. All these black guys every black guy I talk to, he's got high blood pressure. So he must be me. Yeah. I'm looking at you, I could see, yeah, you got high blood pressure. Sure, I knew it. Here it is right there. I knew it. But reality is that, okay, let's talk about diet. Let's talk about culture. Let's talk about, are you in a food desert or not? Let's talk about, what are you doing when you go to work? What kind of job do you have? Is it stressful or not? What types of things are going on in your world? Are you a military veteran? Maybe you have PTSD. Maybe that's part of your stress. Maybe that's part of your high blood pressure. All of these things. Your article, I think, is a tip of the iceberg to a lot of deeper questions that we can get into. Absolutely, yeah, no question about it. Yeah, man, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on our show. Any last words?
No. I'm really happy to talk about the article.
And I look forward to many more articles. If you got any more coming out, let us know. We will have you back. And we appreciate what the things you're doing. This is from Kaiser Health News article, Embedded Bias, How Medical Records Show Discrimination. You can find it on khn.org, The Daily Beast. Also, make sure you try to see it on our ahg.org. And we are talking to Darius Tahir. He is a tech correspondent with Kaiser Health News, and he focuses on how technology affects healthcare. This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Who is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world.
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child on my first airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that people need to see. Often we don't, do the things to show how great our people are. It changes the paradigm of how people think about us, about the collective consciousness of what it means to be us.
And we've been having great conversations about trying to get more African Americans into aviation. And we got a bill that we're trying to get passed that would allow the Pell Grant to be used to help finance aviation education.
This is where I started with this entire conversation by saying, if it were not for America's Heroes Group, I would have given up. So I want to get all my accolades out the way on behalf of America's Heroes Group. Ms. Glenda, thank you. Thank you for encouraging me to press on. I would encourage you all to support this organization. One thing for sure, America's Hero Group is out there. Ms. Glenda will take the time. Ms. Glenda Smith will take the time to listen to you and to steer you in the direction that you need to go.
Thank you for watching another episode of America's Heroes Group, where we provide education about resources and information for our veterans, military, and their family.
We have in our chase bags, we have a care package of hygiene, we have shaving equipment, we have razors, and for the women we have the same personal hygiene items for them as well. And we want to say thank you for their service. This is Chase Bank. Thank you very much.
People in the neighborhood, free haircuts, the service, the food. Look good. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. On behalf of Cliff Kelley, America's Heroes Group, we sincerely thank Chase Bank for coming where it matters to help homeless veterans have a hot meal today and a care package. We are sincerely grateful for this partnership. Yeah.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally. Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Who is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world.
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child on my first airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that people need to see. Often we don't, do the things to show how great our people are. It changes the paradigm of how people think about us, about the collective consciousness of what it means to be us.
And we've been having great conversations about trying to get more African Americans into aviation. And we got a bill that we're trying to get passed that would allow the Pell Grant to be used to help finance aviation education.
This is where I started with this entire conversation by saying, if it were not for America's Heroes Group, I would have given up. So I want to get all my accolades out the way on behalf of America's Heroes Group. Ms. Glenda, thank you. Thank you for encouraging me to press on. I would encourage you all to support this organization. One thing for sure, America's Hero Group is out there. Ms. Glenda will take the time. Ms. Glenda
p.m. Central Standard Time. Please visit our website at www.americashg.org.
From the Xfinity Studios at WVON, it's America's Heroes Group, hosted by Cliff Kelley, with co-host Dr. Damon Arnold and National Guard veteran Sean Claiborne on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON.
Welcome back to America's Heroes Group, our roundtable. We are globally connected with Family Matters, Military Family Matters, with partner family caregiver Keisha L. Jackson. Today is Saturday, October 1st, 2022. October is Breast Cancer, Mental Health, National Disability, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Our host is Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scout Honor Productions. And we have our partner on the line. We have Miss Keisha L. Jackson. She's a U.S. Air Force veteran and family caregiver, and she brought us a panelist today. That is Troy Broussard, Senior Advisor, AARP, ARP, otherwise known as Veterans and Military Family Initiatives. And we're going to talk about AARP and Health Benefits Navigators. How are you guys doing today, Keisha and Troy? How are you guys doing?
Hey, Sean. I'm doing well. How are you today?
Very good, very good. So
Hello,
introduce
Sean.
us to Troy.
Doing great today, Sean. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you doing? I'm very great to have you on the show. Keisha, give us a brief introduction of Troy. Send us off with a great introduction for what Troy does and what he's doing for benefits and also at AARP.
That's so funny. Ironically, before I dialed in, I was just thinking about Troy. And Troy is someone that I can't keep up with. So I was thinking the best way for Troy to introduce himself is to introduce himself. But I will say about the topic, just last Saturday, roughly around this same time, I was talking to someone that was in the military. They didn't retire from the military, but they served about 11 years. And we were just rehashing, some of our experience, our quote-unquote war stories. And so in the process of that, I asked him, I said, have you ever filed for any military, medical, any type of benefits? And the question or the response that I got is what I usually get, no. And so I asked, well, why not? And some of the answers that I always get is that, well, some people actually feel guilty, right? Mm-hmm, right. And then some people say it takes too much time, it's too convoluted, and some of it is just honestly just sheer procrastination on a lot of times on our part. So to have Troy to be able to be the guest panelist today, to be able to talk about these particular benefits and how AARP is partnering with and just tagging up with the VA to make it easier for us to maybe not necessarily take away excuses or could be very valid reasons. I'm looking forward to hearing what he brings to America's Heroes Group today.
Troy, it's good to have you. The first question I want to ask you is, who are healthcare navigators and what do they know that we don't know?
No, Sean, great question. Keisha, great introduction. Thank you so very much. But what I want to talk about here is the tool that we do have. It's a free tool. When you're a veteran, like we all are here on this call, there's more than 40,000 organizations trying to help you, and it can be difficult to find the right information that fits your needs. And what we have found is that health benefits is something that needs to be utilized more by veterans, and you get some of the same common reasons that Keisha just mentioned. So that's why we put together the Veterans and Military Families Health Benefits Navigator. This provides you, it's a landing page that you do have, it's online, to where it gives you detailed health care information from the United States Department of Veterans, military TRICARE, Medicare, and private insurance. And the most important is it was developed to help veterans and their families obtain their service-related health care benefits and to prepare for when they get ready to go to the meetings with the VA. We want to make sure that they are prepared so that they can really maximize their process for getting benefits.
So I've heard of different types of navigators. I've heard of care, otherwise known as care coordinators, patient navigators, community health workers, lay navigators, insurance navigators, clinical navigators. So, but this navigator for AARP, that's a virtual navigator? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's actually a landing page that we do have, and it's to prepare veterans and their families for whenever they go to meet with the VA, when they go to meet with that veteran service officer, so that they can find out what assistance is necessary. And I will tell you that one of the top questions that we get from our veterans and military families with AARP, which is nearly almost 6 million members, is what health care is available for me and my family? That's some of the major questions they have. So this online tool that you can find at aarp.org/Vets Health Navigator, really easy, really simple. It's 32 pages, and it walks you step by step to prepare you for that meeting. And also just wanted to share, we just added some additional information to it, which, you talked about some of the theme months that we do have. But what we found is that women's veterans health care is important. It's growing, specialty emotional and mental health, and as well as specialty dental, oral, and hearing vision as well. So those are newly added to the tool that will help and prepare them for the meeting when they go to the VA. We just want to arm them. We want to arm our veterans and their families with the information so that they can make the right decisions for their families.
I think that's really critical to mention as well that you brought up, is that this is a virtual navigator versus having a person in front of you. Sometimes people don't feel comfortable talking to a person. So having something that you can do on your own at your own pace, take as long as you want, and then, go through the different questions, go through the different pages. 32 pages might sound like a lot, but when you're talking about something online, it's really not that much.
Yes.
And then being prepared, from what I understand, is to being able to have the right documentation when you go to the VA, having the right questions to ask, understanding, what the process is going to be like. So having a lot of those questions kind of answered for you would be very, very helpful. That's essentially what navigators are really all for. No matter any kind of navigator is really like your GPS to help you understand, what you should know and what you don't know you should know.
Oh, I want to share, and another reason why we were so, we listened to our membership, and what we found is that, nearly 60% of all veterans are eligible for VA healthcare services, yet less than half of them, and those that are eligible, use the VA health benefits. And that's according to a recent RAND study. So we wanted to really figure out what is a way that we can provide some assistance. In no way, shape, or form are we trying to, replace the VA or anything along those lines. Our focus is to prepare them when they go to the VA. They will be ready. They'll be prepared, because listen, the VA is a great source. We have great individuals that work at the VA, and those individuals are dedicated to serve our veterans and their families. So we want to just prepare our members to be prepared for when that meeting comes. They'll be ready to go and have all the right questions to ask, because that's the key. Got to make sure you're asking the right questions. So we're very excited about this new online document, and the great thing about it, that this online document where it's housed will be updated by AARP with all the new changes that's coming up. For example, we have the PACT Act that just was released with some new benefits for military service members. So we're going to be adding that on to the Navigator. So it'll be a seamless process. You'll always have the updated, and it's a free online tool for AARP members and the general public as well.
Now, when we're talking about benefits, is it strictly healthcare benefits, or does it go into any other types of benefits, like maybe the VA loan or something like that?
Yes, it will go into healthcare benefits. It'll go into, how to make sure that, like, for example, if there's any type of emotional or mental health, dental, oral, hearing, or vision, and then family caregivers assistance program. And there's also opportunity there where you can talk about VA home loans as well, to where you can get further information as it relates to that. And what I mean is that we'll just outline it in the document to make sure that you can ask those questions. But the real focus of this is for health benefits, because that is the number one thing that veterans and their families, they want to know, how can I get these benefits? Because it can be daunting, I really enjoyed Keisha's story that she mentioned about someone, and sometimes as veterans we feel, no, I don't really want to do that. But as a veteran, we should. We should go to the VA and have those meetings. And this document here will help you prepare for that meeting as well.
Have you seen any veterans? I'm sorry, go ahead, Keisha.
Yeah, Sean, I wanted to mention, in addition, while I'll keep bringing this up, it's always good to have a resource that has been vetted. because now, we're just about to end open enrollment, November the 1st. And a lot of times there's scams. There's people that are preying on people, trying to get their information, putting up fake websites. And so to have AARP, or organizations such as AARP working with the VA or different things, it kind of takes some of that pressure off to let you know that this is okay, because it could be very scary, especially if you don't have a background in the military and knowing like the terminology, or if maybe your spouse or your parent hasn't shared a lot, about their military experience. So things like this could be really helpful and safe for you.
So you touched on this topic that you don't have to be the veteran; you can also be a family member or someone else doing this on their behalf.
Absolutely. Like for a caregiver, for example, we have a portion in the Navigator itself where we really break it down to what are the 3 steps to getting VA health benefits. Okay, so we talk about identify if a service member is eligible, ensure that you have important documents, reach out to others if you need help. The next one would be how to determine which VA benefits are available. How do you qualify? Is it a service-connected injury, special circumstance, or low income? So what this does is it really prepares you for that meeting so that when you hear service-connected injury, it gives a detailed explanation as to what it is. So when those terms come up during the meeting, you're prepared and you're ready and you're able to make the most out of that particular meeting.
So my next question is based on what we just talked about is, are you seeing veteran service organizations using this tool also to help veterans connect with their benefits?
We have shared this information with our local partners, and some of our national partners as well. From a caregiving perspective, with the Elizabeth Doe Foundation, they have taken it and placed some of this information on their website that can be accessed. And what we do is, so we have shared it with local groups throughout our 53 states with AARP, and I say 53 states because we include the 50 states, including D.C., the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico.
Nice.
So we make sure that. Yeah, you like that, right? We got to take care of D.C. I have a lot of my friends that are in the D.C. area, so if they hear this program today, and I don't say anything about DC, I'll be in trouble. But no, but seriously, and they will. Trust me, they will. But I think the key thing is, we want folks to be prepared. It's a free online tool. You can do it from the comfort of your home. You can make mistakes clicking on what you need to click and just go back. There's no pressure. And then when you're done, print everything out or take it with you. You'll be prepared for that meeting with the VA.
What kind of feedback have you gotten from the veteran community?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And we outlined some of that in the benefits navigator. I'll give you an example. There was one group, there was one individual that stated, how do I ensure we get the health care that we need? Last year I left graduate school, moved back home to care for my dad. So a caregiving situation. Served multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, struggled with respiratory issues. But, unfortunately, none of them were able to quit their jobs, and they don't know how they're going to afford this new additional expense. So with the Navigator, they were able to take this Navigator, go through it because they were novices. They're trying to learn, and then now they're able to take and work with this caregiver, with their caregiving parent, to help them get the benefits that they need so that it won't be a financial burden. I think that's the key thing, getting these benefits that are deserved by the veterans so that it won't be a financial burden on the caregiver.
And that's one thing I want to touch on and kind of dive in a little bit deeper because, Keisha, you've been
Sure.
a caregiver.
Yeah.
And then also, caregivers are so critical to particularly our aging veteran population. Our veteran community is mostly seniors, and that trend is going to continue because as our veteran population is aging rapidly. So caregivers are a critical component of making sure our veterans have happy, healthy retirements, happy, healthy lifestyles for the rest of their lives. What are some things that caregivers need to know, or would be easy for them to go in there and actually make the most of this tool? And that's for either Keisha or Troy.
Troy?
Yeah, I'll jump on that. I think the biggest thing that I would ask that folks do with the Navigator and this tool is to review it. You know, I did mention 32 pages, but however, the 32 pages, when you look at it in the booklet form, it's probably only 16, okay? It's very easy to read. It's an easy read, and also it has all the definitions, you know, because in the military, there is some military jargon that is used sometimes. So this particular Navigator will allow you, will break that down so where civilians can understand it, and then that will help the caregiver, you know, help either their spouse or their family members. So, you know, we just want to present something in a month, you know, to where we could let folks know that this Navigator is here, because we want you to be able to ask the right questions and make sure that you maximize whatever benefits that you need to get from the VA.
No, I was looking up information.
Troy,
Go ahead, Keisha.
I just want to add on to that, and for the caregiver, and for the veteran, it's so helpful, you know, to have those conversations early about certain things. Again, and I'll keep going back to that DD 214 and just the different things, or to talk about the branch of service and or maybe where they served, or just those different things, their social security number, and not those things are so helpful. So when you need them, you don't have to wonder where they are. So I'm always asking or always suggesting to caregivers, or even if you aren't considered a caregiver at that particular time, just have those conversations or know where that paperwork is at, so that if you do need it, it's available for you, and it'll make processes like this even a little bit more seamless for you.
I think it's critical for people that are not veterans. They don't understand all the jargon, all the paperwork, all the form numbers and things. We have the DD 214, this 24B strokes, whatever and stuff. All this different terminology in these forms to have some kind of guide that actually helps you through the process. Yes. There was a study that showed that Navigators help people live longer, save money, and live better, and also catch mistakes. 39% to 70% of people who were, say, for example, were breast cancer patients, they found that by using a Navigator, they increased their likelihood of survival from 39% to 70% 5 years after having breast cancer. Just for having somebody that navigate, help you just translate, because Navigators to me are translators. Navigator could be somebody that maybe speaks a language you don't speak, you know, that you need to be able to understand. If English is not your first language, you have veterans out there that English is not their first language, believe it or not. I served with many of them, a few of them. Those are things that the Navigators can help you with. Getting kind of navigating this maze of information that we call the VA system, the VA healthcare system, particularly when it comes to benefits and understanding what you qualify for, what you don't qualify for, you know, what you need to have, what you don't need, and all these different things you have to have prepared in order for you to get the ball rolling, and also save you a lot of aggravation and confusion, because when you start the process, many people have complained years past for millennia that the VA system sometimes is very confusing, and it also is daunting, so people get frustrated and just quit. They just stop.
Yeah, that's what I was definitely going to mention. Sometimes people won't do the process because they just say it takes such a long time, you know, to get everything done. So the earlier you can get started, it could be the best for you. But also, there could be funding out there. There could be finances out there. There could be money available that you don't even know that's for that loved one that you're caring for, or even for the caregiver.
One thing I noticed.
I want to share.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to share just one quick thing. You know, in the Navigator itself, there is a family caregivers assistance program that provides. This is a VA program, but it really details it in the Navigator. Again, it'll tell you how old you must be to do this, 18 years old or older, and also the veteran must meet certain qualifications, and it lists those bullet by bullet, and provides a number that you can call directly to the VA to assist with that. So that's what I mean about having the information that you need armed and ready to prepare yourself for the next steps.
My last thing to talk about, we have about 2 minutes left. The one thing I saw that came up over and over and over again was this idea, or this truth of missed appointments. People scheduling appointments and missing their appointments, or whatever, maybe they weren't prepared. Keisha, can you speak to that in the last minute we have?
In terms of the caregivers or
as far as veterans, people scheduling appointments and not showing up?
Well, that's a little hard to speak to. I don't know specifically. I just know some of the ones in this particular area that are missing their appointments. Some of them are saying they're scheduling their appointments, but because of the distance that they have to drive, or when they're getting there, they're not getting the services that they need, so they're just not going to their appointments. I've had people tell me that they're working and they need those hours and they can't afford to go. So it's just a lot of different things that I've heard specifically in this area for people for VA and missing their appointments.
Troy, any last words in the last 30 seconds?
Yeah. I'll just echo that. Missed appointments is an issue that I think can be handled if we provide individuals with the right information so that they can have a successful appointment. And that's why I refer everyone back to the Veterans and Military Families Health Benefits Navigator, and that can be reached at aarp.org/Vet Health Navigator. So I would say access it. It's free online tool, and prepare yourself for your meeting with the VA.
We appreciate your information, all the great information you've given us, Troy. Troy J. Broussard, Senior Advisor, AARP Veterans and Military Family Initiatives. Keisha L. Jackson, U.S. Air Force Veteran and Family Caregiver. We appreciate your time and all the information you provided us.
Hey, thanks, Sean.
Absolute pleasure to be with you. Thanks.
This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Who is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world.
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child on my first airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that people need to see. Often we don't, do the things to show how great our people are. It changes the paradigm of how people think about us, about the collective consciousness of what it means to be us.
And we've been having great conversations about trying to get more African Americans into aviation. And we got a bill that we're trying to get passed that would allow the Pell Grant to be used to help finance aviation education.
This is where I started with this entire conversation by saying, if it were not for America's Heroes Group, I would have given up. So I want to get all my accolades out the way.
And welcome back to America's Heroes Group, this time with our Roundtable Mental Health Matters with our partner NAMI, Contra, Costa. NAMI is the National Alliance of Mental Illness. Today is Saturday, October 1st, 2022. October is Breast Cancer, Mental Health, National Disability, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. You heard our host, Kelley, at the break. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have a partner on the line again with us, and she has been here many times, Gigi Crowder, the executive director of NAMI Contra Costa in California. NAMI is the National Alliance of Mental Illness and is an advocacy group founded by family members of people with mental illness. And we're going to talk about the role faith and spirituality play as a mental wellness tool. How you doing, Gigi?
I'm great. How are you this week?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Okay. This is also the first, tomorrow is the first day of Mental Health Awareness Week. We have Mental Health Awareness Month and May, and then on Tuesday will be Mental Health Day of Prayer. So while we'll be talking about the important role faith and spirituality plays as a wellness tool for those experiencing mental health crisis.
So from your experience, what you've seen, how does spirituality, well, first define for spirituality. What does spirituality mean? Because many people have different definitions. So when your context, what does spirituality talk about?
For us, it's just what holds meaning for the individual. So we work with a very diverse group of individuals, so it's all inclusive, and we avoid the word religion. Mm-hmm. And we focus on faith and spirituality. So what holds meaning and purpose for individuals.
I think it's also fair to define faith, because faith means people have different conceptions of faith. Faith could be the substance of things hoped for, but what is your definition of faith?
It's also individualized. Mm-hmm. It's having a belief in something without evidence of it being factual. And that's defined by different faith communities differently. But I think it's okay, and I think we all understand that it's generally a complete trust or confidence in something. And for some, it's a strong belief in God or in the doctrines of religion. So that's generally the definition that people use, complete trust or confidence.
When I was thinking about this topic, one of the things that I brought to my mind was the idea of, or the group for the Alcoholics Anonymous. So AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. So one of the things that they use as part of their, I think it's 12 steps, I believe, that you have to go through to get to a point where you have alcoholism under control, where you have it where you've kind of beaten it to a sense or degree. But one of the things that is a primary focus in that is the idea of believing in a higher power, believing in something that's greater than yourself, and which basically lets you it kind of relieves you in a sense and gives you a piece or an idea that you don't have all the answers. You're not this perfect being that can solve all these problems. You've tried to lick alcoholism on your own. You failed many times. You have to give it over in order to win against it by using, I guess, faith.
Right, and also this belief that you're not doing it on your own. And it's been embraced, as you say, for the substance use community, but not as much as we'd like for mental health. But so many people we work with who live with mental health challenges make statements like, the only way I'm going to be able to recover from this is if God allows it. So we just really work toward making sure that if that's a tool that people would like to use, that decision makers embrace that and understand for some people that's just as important as taking the meds and seeing a therapist, that their faith practice, what they believe in, is a part of the healing.
Now, how do you separate? Because a lot of times people when I say separate healthy behaviors from unhealthy behaviors. Because a lot of times people use faith as a means to harm other people. For example, the veterans have come back from Afghanistan, saw what people did in Afghanistan in the name of, even though we say we're not talking about religion, but in the name of their faith, they were doing things that weren't necessarily, some people might say weren't even according to their own doctrine, but they did it in the name of spirituality and faith. Killing people, discriminating against women, causing all kinds of terrorist attacks and things like that. So how does and sometimes people say that they feel alienated from religious communities because they feel like they're being judged. So I have this alcoholism. I went to my church to try to get see what they could do to help me, and I was judged and I felt ashamed and I left. So how do people that have gone through those experiences navigate and try to grab onto something, some kind of higher power to sustain some type of faith in something?
Well, there have been studies that have shown moral injury, which if an individual's moral conscience or values put them in conflict when they've been in the military. As a matter of fact, last month was Suicide Prevention Month, and a lot of the studies done on veterans suggest that there's feelings of guilt or shame or moral injury that causes sometimes a profound sense of betrayal and anger around the position they were put in, that causes them to feel like they're not able to be forgiven for some of the, even though it was done in the name of supporting their country, like you said, when individuals came back from Iran or Afghanistan, and individuals who are in countries that have done some what we see as horrific things, but there's still that part of all of us that things have to sit well with us, or otherwise we're disoriented in our being. So that's where moral injury comes up. And
but
so
define moral injury for people that, because for some people that's kind of a technical term, but in your words, define moral injury to people so people have an idea, particularly for veterans, because I think it's a critical point.
Oh, so it refers to an injury of an individual's moral conscience or their values based on an act or a perceived transgression that they've taken a part of.
So if they shot somebody or killed someone overseas, and they feel, like, how can I go to heaven when I committed a sin?
Yeah, so they might have a profound feeling of guilt or shame, and it could cause anger, with their colleagues, with their comrades, and with society overall until they find peace with it. We know through COVID-19, a lot of the frontline health workers were also in that place. They took an oath to take care of individuals, but it was such a stressful situation when they weren't able to provide the care at the level that they were accustomed to, and they saw so many deaths. They also were, a lot dealing with moral injury. And, of course, no one could ever have predicted that hospitals would be flooded with so many people that the doctors and the nurses couldn't meet all of the needs. So it's not just, with that. It's with any environment in which you're put in a highly stressful situation and not able to meet the need. And so a lot of people turn to their faith and spirituality and practices that they have to work past those feelings.
So for those people that say, because this is I think an interesting thing to point out. So we have people that, for example, might have gone through a very traumatic experience being combat veterans, and then one person will come back and say, I don't believe in God anymore because I've seen so many horrible things, and I don't. It can't be a God. How can there possibly be a God if all this killing and violence and in the name of religion most of the time? But then you have another person that comes back and they double down on their faith because they maybe use that faith to get them through that situation, get them through that trauma, and have found peace and joy in that. How do you reconcile those two different experiences or two different outcomes, those two different mindsets?
Well, we also see in mental health those that have a reliance on their faith are able to not carry kind of like the God complex for themselves and are able to get to a place of healing, just like the individuals who abuse substances. When they include that in there, they are actually healthier. And I would say for someone who has decided that they don't have a belief system anymore because of what they've experienced, that not being able to find a place of peace with connection to purpose and your a power greater than self has been continually harmful for those individuals versus the healing that takes place when they can relieve themselves of full responsibility.
So how does a person find that faith? How does a person become more spiritual?
It's individual, but most individuals, it's been, documented and studied. Most individuals do so with a personal spiritual awakening that they have themselves. It's not anything that someone can do for an individual, but sometimes individuals get so sick and tired of being sick and tired, they find themselves going into a faith center or find themselves talking to someone and surrendering. And when that happens, and especially when it happens for people who live with mental health, they're able to find a peace. Where sometimes one of our biggest struggles in mental health is that sometimes people believe so heavily in the faith practice that they think that they could be miraculously cured from schizophrenia or bipolar disorder and stop taking their meds. So I think people like me who work with people have to negotiate with them around the fact that perhaps this is part of their calling, that they live with mental health, and that psychiatrists have been given the skill set by their faith leaders by God to help them in their recovery with them taking their meds. It gets really tricky. We also notice a lot of individuals, when they're in a more decompensated state, will even believe they're God or Jesus. So it's really been, a field of study that has really been studied a lot, and so many more people do better, and it's documented when they let go and let God. I guess that would be the terminology, both for those who live with substance use and those who live with mental health challenges.
The thing of working with people when I work with people that were homeless, one of the things that I found that help people get some kind of salvation, that I'm talking about, not just spiritual salvation, but salvation in the moment right now, is the learning the tools and the methods that are tried and true that actually provide results. There is a proverb that Jesus spoke that said, judge a tree by the fruit that it bears. So, but a good tree can't bring forth bad fruit, nor can a good tree can't bring forth bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bring forth good fruit. So that being said, it's almost like an explanation of the scientific method. If you're doing something that is not getting you forward, then know it cannot be something that's positive or working in your life. Therefore, you have to try something different. Doing the same thing over and over and over again that's not giving you results is not helpful. It's a definition of insanity, right? I mean, not to be,
and not feeling like you have to carry it on your own. So I think that's the folks who have had severe substance abuse issues and have gotten clean and sober. Part of it has been recognizing that they can get a sponsor, or that they can lean on their faith practice and feel more forgiven for anything they've done in their past that might make them feel like they're not worthy. So plenty of studies to that.
Yeah, it seems like the key thing is making sure you're in the right group, the right people that are not judging you, that accept you. I have my own theory on atheism. So I had this conversation with a pastor recently. We talked about the idea of atheism and that people that are agnostic, and not to say that you can believe whatever you want to believe, but I always believe that everybody really truly believes in God. You don't necessarily believe in your God. So if you have your own definition of what God, like God from the time of beginning of life, since we've been trying to figure out or create an idea of God or a concept of God, is just basically truth and love. That's really all it really is.
Right.
When you string it all together and break it down to what the meaning of what God really is, all it is truth and love. That's what we're trying to find. Every scientist, every doctor, every person that's working towards truth and love, every person is trying to find fact, is actually a follower of God. Basically, you're searching for a God in some kind of method or some kind of way. So you may not believe in your God, the God that you created in your mind. You might be a white guy on a throne somewhere with a long beard directing cosmic traffic. Maybe that's your God, and you find out that's a bunch of nonsense. That could be the case. But the idea that you have to believe in some kind of truth and love. So when you say to me you don't believe in God, what you're telling me, how I interpret that is you don't believe in truth, you don't believe in love at all. There is no truth, there is no love. So you can assign that another name if you want to call it God or whatever you want to call it. But that to me is what I believe is what makes sense to me in a logical sense as to what we are trying to do. We're trying to search for answers and for truth. We're essentially seeking what we called from the beginning of time of language. We called it God. That's because we didn't know what it was.
Right. And when we're working with people who live with mental illness, even some severe mental illness, our job at NAMI and affiliates, and I share this with my staff, is to connect people to purpose. And it's our God-given purpose. And even with living with some of the most debilitating illnesses, everyone was put on earth for a purpose. And I think truth and love is found when people find their purpose. That's when people who were not taking their meds decide maybe they can try their meds when they have, and they heal a lot at our affiliates. We're built off of volunteerism. It's amazing how individuals, once they're helping others, connect with their purpose, and then we help them find something that they have a strong skill set about that, they weren't aware of, but they have to open up to the truth and love, and that's always been surrounding them that they couldn't see, because there is some anger, there is some bitterness. Many of us, when things have happened in our lives, have said, "Why? How could this happen? If there's God, how could this happen?" But as you mature and you build your personal relationship with every you define, then you get to a place where you understand it's just all a part of, being on Earth. Being here. No one promised that every day was going to be great. Mm-hmm. And I've loved the work we do at NAMI because we actually have a faith net group. So early on in the establishment of NAMI, people recognized that they needed to rely heavily on their faith and spiritual practices because having a loved one who lives with mental illness is very difficult, so the families rely on it. And then we recognize that those who are most successful in their recovery in terms of living with a disability called mental illness, but doing relatively well, is because they have found purpose. Or as you say, truth in love.
Right, exactly. No, from what you understand as a professional, is drug addiction or any kind of addiction, is that a mental illness?
It's a behavioral, so we have the terminology behavioral health, and that includes people who live with mental illness as well as substance use disorder. And I think for most people, the precursor to the use of substances is some unaddressed mental illness that occurred. Of course, there's family heredity that causes it, but for the most part, there's been some kind of trauma that went unaddressed. And so to manage the symptoms, some individuals use substances knowing that they could potentially be harmful to them, but, they're treating their mental health with something that's harmful to them.
Now, one thing when we say the word mental illness, a lot of people think crazy. You're calling me crazy. If there's any kind of mental illness or mental impairment, I must be a crazy person.
That would mean that all of us who went through COVID, who all now have some level of struggle because of having gone through COVID, would be that C word. I don't use that C word, but we're starting now because of COVID to understand there's different levels of struggle that people have, whether it be depression, mild or really chronic, depression that keeps a person from getting out of bed for months on end. The fact that we have opportunities for healing is what we like to promote, even with the most severe of mental illnesses. Even though there's people who take their meds and still don't have relief from the symptoms, there's tools now that we have in place that are starting to cause a lot of more positive outcomes for individuals.
Wow. So what are some of the things that people can do to try to exercise their minds, to try to be more productive of improving their mental health?
Well, just like those who don't have a diagnosis of a mental illness, one of the things that we did, I'm also the chair of the statewide Mental Health and Spirituality Initiative in California, recognizing the important and critical role faith plays for so many people. We did a whole training around music and how important music is for individuals. And we have not funded it the way we should, music therapy, but even when you go into convalescent hospitals with the elderly, we see a vast improvement when a song comes on that they, can relate to. So music, nature, walking, getting exercise, drinking water, having a healthier diet, all of those things improve and promote mental wellness.
That's one thing I think is important you brought up and mentioned, to reiterate this again, is that we're not ever suggesting using what you believe or as opposed to what is fact. Fact always trumps what you believe because fact is what it is. So don't think that you can just jump off the building and fly like a bird because your faith told you can do it. Look at the facts and look at reality and use the science and the medicine to help you get to a better place. If eating healthy, doing certain things, some people meditating helps a lot. Taking your medication, those types of things which are really important that we oftentimes we don't really look into enough as a society because once again, healthcare and when it comes to the mind, it's one of the things we're still not fully got our arms around yet. We got to get better at treating our brains as an organ, just like any other organ. We're looking at the NFL. We had one of the quarterback for the Miami Dolphins got hit this weekend and was put down. And so,
Right.
I mean, obviously, it was going through some kind of something's going on up inside that cranium. But once again, we focused on strengthening our arms, our legs, becoming a faster runner, a better thrower. But what are we doing to protect our minds, our brains?
Exactly, and it's a muscle just like any other body part, and it needs attention, and it needs to be nurtured, it needs to be, taken care of. What we read, all of that. So if we're talking about supporting a person toward wellness, I also like to share with the folks we work with positive affirmations. We work with young children, and we have curriculum called I'm a Winner, because we know that so often children are told they're loved, but they don't feel lovable. That's why we have the higher suicide rates. So promoting self-love and connection to purpose is kind of probably the premier things that we need to be doing now post-COVID for young people.
I think it's critical, like I said, with veterans out there, people around the world that listen to this. I mean, I'm not going to tell you what religion to prescribe to. I'm not trying to sell you a religion or sell you any kind of faith or idea.
No.
But if you can't use the word God or higher power, faith and love, if you can, or truth and love, if you can just believe in truth and love and use that as your foundation, and just go from there. Starting on some kind of path that leads you to a better place. And usually when you start seeking, the reason why we have all the technology that we have, the reason why we have the ability to do all the things we're doing right now, we have the medicine and the skyscrapers and the spaceships and all that cool stuff and the internet, is because we were seeking truth. We were trying to find facts, trying out how things worked, find out the reality of the world we're living in. Use that as a foundation. You can start just with that. Love. What is love all about? Do you love yourself? Do you love the people around you? Are they giving you love? Do you recognize the love that they give you?
Yeah.
And if you're not in that kind of environment, find a better environment.
Exactly. That's why we actually use faith leaders, diverse group. Our work is interfaith. So we do allow space for people to even be atheists and come to our statewide mental health and spirituality, because we recognize people carry a different path. And so when we do that, we open up opportunities to learn. It's not cool to push people away because they're different. We never proselytize. We shouldn't do that. We don't do that. And we just allow people to find their own journey to, as you say, truth and love.
Wow, well said. I really appreciate your time and all the things you bring to us. Any last words?
No, I would just say the 4th Tuesday is Mental Health Day of Prayer. And so for anyone who utilizes prayer as a form of having God listen to them, please pray for all those who live with mental health challenges, who are unsheltered and sleeping under the stars. That's what we'll be doing.
Glenda is coming in on the studio. Before she jumps in, one thing I wanted to ask you is that, have you ever seen an unexplained miracle?
Yes, several. In the work that I do, I see them all the time. Yep.
You tell us one in particular, something that, and I don't mean like, the miracle of waking up in the morning or the miracle of,
Nope. I'm saying my nephew was in my swimming pool, and he'd been missing for quite a while. He was 4 years old, and so he floated back up to the top, and when we got to the backyard and discovered that's where he was at, I remember having the paramedics, the law enforcement, everyone. I said, put out your hands and pray. And then I had my moment with my God, and I said, you did it for Lazarus, you can do it for my nephew. And I know it was a miracle because I know the signs and how long he was underwater, and God made a decision to bring him back. So, and I've had other miracles happen right in front of my eyes. That was a life or death miracle, and God showed it to me. And I've seen others with people who live with mental health challenges who have, woken up and been okay after years and years of suffering. And I've seen people with health-related issues who the doctor saw something and said they didn't have long to live, and now they're living and there's no signs. So, yes, I do believe in miracles.
Gigi Crowder, Executive Director of NAMI Contra, Costa in California. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for that.
Well, speaking of believing in miracles, April 2016 was our first show, Sean. You remember that?
Oh, yeah, definitely remember that.
We didn't have any money. We didn't have any guests. We had no support.
So 6 years later, we have great support now, great guests, but nobody really sponsors us anymore. Nobody is feeding into us, even though we're pouring into everyone else. But guess what? But God, oh glory. See, I serve him faithfully, regardless. Good, bad, and the ugly, what day it is. We in 8 major cities. We in 700. We was looking at the metrics today during before the show. We're in 721 cities. We're in 49 countries. We just add an additional country, and we are over 1 million downloads. Matter of fact, it's 1,180,000 and some change. We had 72,000 downloads on our podcast from last week. But God. So whether you will accept him, whether you will acknowledge him, God is God, and you can't get around that. You can look at the creation and know that came from the creator. You can deny him, but you can't deny him. You don't have to accept him, but God is real, because we're sitting right here because of God. Not because man has helped us, not because of we are sitting here because of God. It's called faith in action.
Faith in action.
You take that one step, God got the rest of it. But you got to do your part, which is belief. If you will believe it, he can get it to you. But you're going to have to do your work. See, so many people play church, go to church. It ain't about no church. It's about that relationship. Because when it's all said and done, you got to believe in order to receive him. So on that note, honey, thank you to everybody for believing and tuning in, because that's the part of what we've done. The work here through faith. To our technical producer, Lady J, thank you, girl, for keeping us balanced. To the best digital media producer we have ever had, Ivan Ortega, who came from God. See, we have been consistent in excellence when we haven't had money to pay. Guess how these shows have gotten paid for? Through Cliff, through myself, when we haven't had money to pay. So that's called faith. Sean, you're one of the best co-hosts we have ever had.
I appreciate that. Try my best.
Dr. Arnold, Cliff, everybody. We're blessed here. Have a wonderful weekend.
The views expressed on